Good evening. Palaniappan Chidambaram walked an impossible tightrope and surprisingly managed to come out looking reasonably good. Yes, we were expecting a much bigger stick and a sprinkling of carrot. Instead, we got numerous carrots of varying sizes and a considerably thin stick. Yes, we were expecting far more drastic cuts in social sector spending and plan outlays and more consolidation. What Chidambaram really delivered was a low-calorie budget. It's been called an election budget. Someone even went to the extent of calling it a Robin Hood budget. Whichever way one looks at it, one thing is for certain, he has managed to send out just enough signals to investors that he is serious about reducing the fiscal deficit. What he announced for the export sector will cater to the rising current account deficit, but by far the most striking feature of this budget was the commitment to social welfare as well as catering to the political constituency of his ruling coalition. What else has happened? Chidambaram has raised rupees 18,000 crore of additional revenue through direct and indirect taxes, the former mostly by taxing companies more. Excise and customs remain more or less the same with no changes in base rates. There is a rupees 10,000 crore additional provision for the food security bill, some very small personal income tax reliefs and an additional deduction of rupees 1 lakh for interest paid on first home loans over and above existing 1.5 lakh. Plus, there are promises on new savings instruments sold through post offices that will be inflation indexed. The surcharge on income tax is up from 5 to 10% for companies with taxable incomes above rupees 10 crore, which he hopes will be balanced by giving manufacturing companies that invest more than 100 crore in plant and machinery over the next 2 years, that is 2013 to 15, a 15% investment allowance. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next 1 hour, we will try and dissect the budget, make sense of what has been announced, and also get you reactions from all over the spectrum, including political views, the market sentiment, industry mood, as well as some high quality analysis. Joining me on the panel tonight will be Bharat Bhushan, senior journalist, Dr. Soumyakanti Ghosh, economist, also Biraj Patnaik, special advisor, right to food, also Mr. Nilotpal Basu of the CPM, Mr. Prakash Javadekar will be joining us in just a bit. From Bombay, we will be joined by one guest. As Prakash Javadekar has been joined, I've been told. From Bombay, we'll be joined by Mr. Sunil Kapadia as well. I'll go right into the show and go to Mr. Prakash Javadekar briefly. Sir, I have sort of 5-6 guests on the show, but first reaction I want from you, how do you see this budget? A low-calorie budget, a Robin Hood budget? Now, we all know that a low-calorie budget is not supposed to energize anybody, and it hasn't really energized or galvanized anything. It is supposed to trim the fat. Has Chidambaram trimmed the fat, or at least made a beginning?
Helplessness reflects on every page of this budget. And this helplessness has not come as the Congress wants nation to believe because of international situation. You will recollect that during the NDS period also, there was South Asian crisis, there was drought and very severe droughts for 2 years, there were sanctions after Pokhran, but growth momentum can be kept only if you make heavy investment, public investment into road, port, irrigation and many other infrastructure sectors which actually increase. What has happened is not a single freight corridor or something has come up. So there is no job opportunities, there is skill development corporation has proved to be non-starter. So this government has brought this situation by its own follies.
Right, Mr. Javadekar, I'll come to my studio guest now. First up, Mr. Bharat Bhushan, how do you really see the budget? I know you have a differing opinion than what Mr. Prakash Javadekar said. Rip it into us.
I think it's a reasonably good budget. I think he said right in the beginning that his problem is current account deficit, which is fueled by your oil imports, your coal imports and other imports. And he said the only way to fund it is through foreign direct investment, investment from financial institutional investors and external commercial borrowings. So your balance of payment issue has to also be addressed. Now you need, your deficit is about 70 to 80 billion dollars a year. Right. That right now it's accounted for
75 billion to actually finance that deficit.
Yeah, I'm saying so that comes through FDI. So he has tried to make investment attractive to foreigners, one, and if he can't make it attractive, they should at least not move out of India. So he did that. Those who are saying it's an election budget, I don't know on what basis they are saying election budget. It's true that he has thrown more money at government's existing schemes, But you know, no new scheme named after Nehru Gandhi family has been started. The only populist thing he's done is that that women's bank. You know, I don't see the purpose of it, because you know, women entrepreneurs can go to normal banks and get whatever they want. So really, it's not an election budget. It's a budget that seeks to address foreign investment. It seeks to address domestic investment, how to improve domestic investment, especially in the capital goods sector. And it tries to keep the traditional Congress policies going.
Right. I also am being told that Mr. Bhakta Charan Das from the Congress has also joined us. Before I come to you, Mr. Das, I have a couple of more questions for my guests here. I'll just come to you in just a bit. First, before I go to Mr. Basu and Biraj Patnaik, I want to go to Dr. Soumyakanti Ghosh and get an industry type of explanation, expectations, and see how industry really views this particular budget. Before the budget, he gave out the right signals, Dr. Ghosh, and he sort of galvanized markets and industry alike. Post the speech, that sort of optimism wasn't really seen. How do you rate this budget?
I see there are two aspects to it. There were no major disappointments from the budget. In fact, there was a pleasant surprise when he said that the fiscal deficit has been contained at 5.2% of GDP, which is a remarkable achievement. But I believe that has been done through expenditure cuts. But whatever may be, the fact is that he has attained a 5.2% of GDP, has kept his promise, and next year he has made it at 4.8%. So that's the first point which the industry really appreciates. The second point which I want to mention over here is that, it has taken some steps, but I think the steps are okay, but not to the extent that it is going to galvanize the industry and into a full throttle action over the next subsequent year.
Right. Biraj Patnaik, before I go to Mr. Basu, I want your reaction on the kind of budget that you view this as.
No, I would look at it from the perspective of the social sectors, and insofar as the social sectors are concerned, I would say this is a budget that is very high on intent but very low on content. And let me explain why. The big ticket item, which was the food security bill, has a 10,000 crore additional allocations. And even though Mr. Chidambaram clarified that if the bill is passed and you need more money, he would give it, the effective, you've cut the food subsidy by 5,000 crores. So effectively, you're allocating only 5,000 crores for a big ticket scheme, which requires, by the government's own estimate, to cover 67% of the population. It requires
now revised to 70, I think.
Now revised to 70. We don't know. It's with the law ministry, waiting for it to be placed in parliament. But by its own estimates, it required about 27,000 crores. That's been brought down effectively to 5,000 crores. So it's a cut of 22,000 crores. I don't agree with you, Akhtar, that there has been increases in social sector spending. On the contrary, if you adjust for inflation, there have either been decreases or drastic cuts. And let me tell you how a clever presentation of the facts does not reflect these cuts. Now, in his speech, let's take just one example before you go on to the other guests. We can run through it through the rest of the program. Child malnutrition is a major issue, and the only institutional mechanism we have is the ICDS. Now, Mr. Chidambaram said in his speech that, look, I'm giving an 11% increase from 15,400 crores last year to 17,700 crores. But what he did not say is that the ICDS is restructuring. It's been restructured completely. And the plan allocation is 1,23,000 crores in the 12th five-year plan period. We've had 1 year of restructuring that's gone without any substantive increase in budgets. This year, therefore, the minimum, the minimum I'm saying, which should have been given, if you look at the overall plan allocation, is about 26,400 crores. But that has not been met.
So you're saying that...
So it's not. So for me, it's 7,000 crores less than what is required by the government's own estimation.
Fair point.
So therefore, I don't see an increase. And I can take you through every program. And of course, I hope sometime later in the show we'll talk about healthcare.
Absolutely.
Where, I see the most serious problem with the way healthcare has been budgeted.
You make a fair point, sir. We'll come back to you during the course of the program. I want to go to Nilotpal Basu before I go to my Bombay guest, sir. Biraj Patnaik says high on intent, low on content. I have a feeling you will tend to agree with that.
More than that, I will first respond to what Prakash Javadekar was saying, that this budget reflects helplessness. But I have a rider. It is a self-inflicted helplessness. You see, if you read the budget along with the economic survey that he had presented yesterday, it is very clear that the biggest problem that we are facing is because that sharply consumption has come down from successive years 8% to 4%. So how to rake that up And the whole concern in the budget is only, as somebody was saying, that how to get investment, how to get foreign investment, how to have fiscal deficit financed by foreign financial flows. Now, I think we are not learning any lesson from this recent experience that United States or Europe is going through. I mean, I was reading something on Italy. I mean, situation is horrendous there, and they are actually apprehending that the entire banking system may collapse. So I think this priority that he has chosen, that somehow investment is to be boosted because growth is the single-minded obsession with this government. As a result of that, what you do, you either prune public expenditure, you have a cut on subsidies. Actually, there is a very sharp cut on subsidies. Food subsidy has, in spite of this very ambitious so-called food security program, in real terms there's a cut because only 5,000 increase if you take the whole subsidy bill plus this 10,000 additional allocation, only 5,000 increment, which when factored with the current rate of inflation, which by the way the government has admitted is the highest in the world today, food price inflation.
I take your point, sir. I take your point, sir. I'll come back to you in just a bit.
No, just one sentence. What the industry is saying that fiscal deficit pegging. Now, that is my fear that ultimately, you see, it is the public expenditure which becomes a casualty of this fiscal fundamentalism of fixing fiscal deficit, because that is the darling of the corporate.
Right, sir. I want to come back to that point in just a bit. Sunil Kapadia has joined us for a while now. Mr. Kapadia, many thanks for joining us tonight. First up, my question to you is, to be fair to Mr. Chidambaram, now, his only real promise before the budget was to deliver a 5.3% fiscal deficit. He has capped it at 5.2%. He has cut the 2012-13 deficit to 5.2% and stayed with 4.8% for the next year. But there is also this view, sir, and tell me if you agree with it, that this is a bloody brilliant cover-up job by tweaking some numbers to make them look bad and tweaking others to make them look good. Is the way he has managed to come out smelling of roses. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think the key really is on the surcharge which corporates will have to pay and which individuals will have to pay, as well as some tweaking that has happened on the indirect tax front, which is going to give him additional revenues of 17 to 18,000 crores. There is also an assumption that if there is a 6.1% GDP growth at constant prices, which effectively means with 7% inflation at about 13%, there is a tax buoyancy of about 1.4, 1.5%, which has been assumed in the overall tax collection. So much would depend upon how effectively this tax buoyancy is maintained, and if one will really be able to sort of garner this kind of resources at the 13% growth, assuming a 6% growth at constant prices. That's really the background under which the tweaking or the fiscal deficit target of 5.2% is likely to be achieved in 13-14 and to be reduced to 4.8% in the subsequent period.
Right, sir. Bhakta Charan Das is an MP from the Congress. He's also joined us. Sir, let me come to you now. Differing views on what kind of budget this really is. What is your opinion? How does your party and your cadre see this budget? Did Mr. Chidambaram really deliver and cater to his cadre right now, giving this pretty balanced sort of a budget? Do you agree with that?
Yes. In a democracy like ours, we are bound to carry on with the millions, with the masses, with the people, with the common people. And even though the challenging scenarios are there around the world, around the country, in spite of that, we have never neglected the social sector, and we have stood by the majority, and that is what Mr. Chidambaram has done. At the same time, to ensure 6.7% around growth next year, and in a couple of years, and this 12-5-year plan up to 8% growth, that has to be ensured to make the nation stronger in the economic scenario of the world. At the same time, to achieve the inclusive growth, the programs have been drawn up, and in all social sectors, there has been increase from 11% up to 22% under different scheme. Under Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana to the Agriculture Ministry and Education also, there has been 17% hike in the budget. And the women at the movement, those who are the section highly neglected, they have been given high emphasis, and the Nirbhaya scheme is a revolutionary project to suit to the women of our country.
Right.
The present day the demand.
Right.
And the women corporate bank, which would be maintained by the women, that's also a revolutionary achievement.
Right, it's a new idea, sir. I agree with that. I want to get Mr. Javadekar's opinion on something. Mr. Javadekar, I'm going to go to Mr. Ashwani Kumar first, and I want you to listen to what he has to say. Then I want your reaction after that. Ashwani Kumar, Law Minister, of course. The question I want to ask him is that people are calling this a low-cal budget. They're calling it a Robin Hood budget. What does he really think of the budget by his cabinet colleague?
I think it's impossible for any finance minister to satisfy all segments of society totally. But I must say that he has done a commendable job balancing the compulsions of fiscal deficit, which he needed to contain at a certain level, and also to spur investment and the growth stimulus in the economy. I think he has been able to achieve both the objectives in a very fine but a delicate balance. The important challenge before the finance minister was to contain fiscal deficit, and he has assured the nation that 2013 and 14, the fiscal deficit will remain at 4.8% of the GDP, and the revenue deficit would be contained at 3.3% of the GDP. Now remember, without this kind of fiscal prudence, all foreign investments into India would have stopped. India could have suffered a downgrade. I think this is a great achievement that the finance minister has been able to pull off. At the same time, without adding additional taxation burdens on the common man, he has been able to ensure that all the pro-poor programs of the UPA government, the flagship programs, are not deprived of their funds. Maximum allocations have been made to the health, education and rural development sector. So I think it's all in all a very good budget.
Right, that was Ashwani Kumar, of course. Mr. Javadekar, it is a great achievement, says Mr. Ashwani Kumar. Reactions, please.
He has to defend his colleague, and he is a nice and very efficient, good advocate. The issue is the facts, and facts are two. He has burdened common man before the budget by 93,000 rupees by reducing all kinds of subsidies on petrol, diesel, gas, doing various taking, and then all other charges, railways and everything has gone up. So people are already burdened, and he has promised that they will burden post-budget also, that they will bring down the subsidy of petrol, diesel from 95,000 crore to 65,000 crore. So yet another 30,000 crore dose is yet to come. So this is a new scheme of model of Congress. So Bansal will raise it before, raise after the budget. Chidambaram will raise it before, raise after the budget. But in the budget they will say that we have not increased. More than that, the FDI, why the CAD difficulty has come. Current account deficit has arisen because our exports are not becoming competitive because of high finance cost and many other structural weaknesses.
Also external factors, sir.
He now depends only on three sources. 1 minute. He has said only three factors, that we want $75 billion investment, and that will come either through external borrowings or through FDI or through FII. So these are the only three sources. He is not thinking that domestic investors are going outside and investing outside. So he has no plan for that, how domestic investors will invest inside. So now it is 50% of the inward FDI is domestic investment going outside. So it is absolutely a shocking thing. Let us understand that edible oil, which was not an import list in 2003, Now we are 50% dependent, and $10 billion is what we are incurring expenditure on.
Right.
So
Right,
this
sir.
is what is happening.
Right, sir.
And let us also, last point only, that ultimately what is the way out? The way out, we believe that it has to be public investment in irrigation, in infrastructure, which create job opportunities. And through skill development, you do it. Their skill development, last year's expenditure is big zero.
Right, sir. Sir, I want to go to my Bombay guest. I'll come back to you.
Nothing has happened. You just see that.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Javadekar. First, I'll go to my Bombay guest, then I'll come to the guest in the studio. They've been waiting really patiently. Mr. Sunil Kapadia, his first goal, Mr. Chidambaram's first goal really was to avoid doing any more damage to investor confidence, which is what really happened after last year's budget. Now, unlike his own 2008 budget, which some people would argue started this slide, budget 2013-14 has taken the middle path of low ambition and low risk. Would you agree with that assessment? Very briefly, sir.
Absolutely, I would agree with that, because if you see what he has really done is to, when it comes to taxing the super rich, he's not touched the middle class or the lower middle class and the working population. So that's the middle part that has been adopted. And also for corporates, he's wanting to tax only those who are earning more than 10 crores by way of additional surcharge. So definitely that's the middle path. And FDI, from an FDI perspective, again, one would have been happier if the provisions relating to indirect transfer with retrospective effect enacted last year, or the royalty definition enlarged last year would have been dealt with in this budget. But I do hope that, in times to come, and especially if DTC gets introduced in the budget session later, the new bill after the standing committee recommendations are considered, one would see some progress on that front also.
Right, Mr. Kapadia, many thanks for joining us. We'll have to let Mr. Kapadia go right now. I want to come to Biraj Patnaik really quickly. Sir, I have to make a round of my studio guests. You had a point.
Very quickly. Yeah. One is the point that Niluda was making. Look at the UK. For 2 years, they've been cutting their expenditure, and now they've ended up with losing their AAA rating. So it's not that investor confidence is going to go up. If you cut down your public expenditure, put your domestic constituency in great hardship, and then claim that, look, investor confidence is going to go up. Second, I want to counter Mr. Ashwani Kumar's point that health and education budgets have been protected. They have not. They have not. These are not real increases. If you look at the flagship public health program, the National Rural Health Mission, from 20,822 crores, which was the BE last year, forget the RE, you've increased it to 21,231 crores, which means you've increased it only by 8%. Which does not even cover for inflation. And on top of that, you've merged it with the National Urban Health Mission, which needed 4,000 crores additionally to launch, according to the Health Ministry's estimates. You've merged it with the major non-communicable diseases program, which was going to start, which needed 2,000 crores to start with, and so on. So what you've effectively done is cut down the NRHM budget by at least 15 to 20%. But showing overall increase of 37% in health. Now, and I think that's being done deliberately.
Right.
Because we are going back, and I say this with some confidence, because look at the way the Planning Commission tried to bring in the corporate sector to privatize healthcare. When that did not happen, they were willing to spend up to 2.5% of GDP, but through a corporate model. When that did not happen, they are now starving the public sector of funds. So if you kill the NRHM, if you kill the public sector, you have the same model that we had in the 90s, where the private sector is going to go at the expense of the public sector. And this is what I think Mr. Chidambaram has done with the health sector.
Before I come to Bharat, Dr. Ghosh, do you agree with that? These increases are not really increases, it's a brilliant cover-up job.
No, I don't tend to agree fully with that. Some of the points I will agree, and some numbers I will show you to support my contention. If you look at the numbers this year, for example, in terms of there has been a lot of argument in the studio that there has been a squeeze in capital expenditure. But from my point of view, there has been no squeeze in capital expenditure as such. Capital expenditure this year is supposed to grow by 31%. And from last year, if you look at the plan expenditure, yes, there has been a squeeze of 91,000 crores. But this year, if you look at the increase in the non-plan expenditure has also been of 30,000 crores. So it's not correct to say that the capital expenditure has been squeezed. Yeah, but there are some points which I tend to agree with Bharat, that Yes, because if you look at the budgeted estimates and the revised estimates, what he has done in some cases, he has reduced the revised estimates significantly and then saying that it has been a 30% increase. So, from that point of view, I tend to agree with him. But there are several other points in the budget which I would like to mention, and I mean, which is very interesting. If you look at the numbers very carefully. For example, I mean, if you look at the tax revenue numbers, tax revenue this year are supposed to grow by, I mean, the numbers are reasonable. But one numbers which I am not sure how he is going to attain is the non-tax revenue, which is supposed to grow by 33 to 35%. So that means that is the government going to go for an 4G auction next year? That is a debatable point. The other point over here is mentioned the disinvestment number. This year the disinvestment number is supposed to grow by 133% this year. I am not sure how it's going to go such a number of disinvestment.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a very carefully crafted budget. There has been exactly a reduction in expenditure by 60,000 crores and the revenue receipts has actually declined by 60,000 crores. And finally, I would like to make one point is that he has made a lot of promises on the women's empowerment and all those things. They are very good initiatives, but I am sure that also leaves a scope of some expenditure curtailment at the end of the next year.
Fair point. Bharat, Bhushan, do you agree with Biraj or would you like to tend to go towards Soumyakanti's side? Let me tell you one particular example that it struck me as well. On the positive side, of course, the FM has not really slashed the planned expenditure for FY14 in a big way, as many had expected or feared. The estimate of rupees 5.5 lakh crore is about 29% higher than the revised estimate of 4.29 lakh crore for FY13. Did you expect that?
You see, what can he do? I cannot understand what Mr. Prakash Javadekar is saying. You know, that you can't have deficit financing, and you know the entire world economy is collapsing. Your economy is going down the tube. How do you shore it up? In normal circumstances, you could do deficit financing and you could lower taxes, but circumstances are such that his room for maneuver is extremely limited. So, definitely. You know, people who are criticizing him should come up with alternatives and say, where would they get the money for all these things?
Right, and those are the questions I would like to put to Mr. Nilotpal, Basu and Mr. Javadekar. But first, we'll take a break right now. We'll come back. We'll have a new guest joining us from Bombay. We'll also get you corporate reactions. Nainalal Kidwai is on the show, as is Captain Gopinath. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come on this special 1 hour special budget day special program on RSTV. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Continuing coverage of Budget Day. Captain Gopinath, of course, a great aviator, also chairman of the erstwhile Deccan Airways. He spoke to RSTV a little while earlier. Let's see what he had to say and his reactions and views on this budget. Take a look.
Well, I have Captain Gopinath with me. He is the man who made the most Aam Aadmi fly in India. Let me start by asking you, Captain Gopinath, what is your first impression about Mr. Chidambaram's budget?
I think the whole country, especially this budget, it was identified more with Chidambaram rather than as a budget of the country, because when he came back a second time, that appointment itself reversed the negative sentiments about India, the shadow that was cast when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, or the previous finance minister, had presented the budget, which actually spooked the entire investor community, and it was almost like a sudden downfall from there, where the stock market took tumbling down, inflation went up, production came down. So I think his appointment itself signaled a change, and that was also it set the tone of optimism. So I think this, like in anything, the most important things are the messages that you are sending, and I think he sent the right message then. But the budget, I'm not very sure. Looking at the headlines that we have got, it is creating that kind of investor optimism, which I think everybody was looking for. There's something which probably everybody was pinning hopes on it, as to what are the 2-3 things that he's going to say, which is going to create the kind of optimism that the country is looking for. I've not still fully gone through the budget, but on the face of it, the very fact that he's there, the fact that he has not done anything negative, given the compulsions that he has, given the pressure that I think left to himself probably he would have done much more. But the very fact that he has not done anything retrograde or negative, like, you know, the GAR was introduced, the waterfall, you know, and all those things, I think, by not doing the negative things, I think he has done the positive thing.
Okay. And
there you go, Captain Gopinath with his views on the budget, of course. We also spoke to Nainal Kidwai, Vice President of industry body FICCI, also HSBC Bank, I beg your pardon, very well-known and authoritative industry voice. Let's see what she had to say on the budget. Take a look.
Finance Minister P. Chidambaram has announced his budget proposal for 2013-14 to get the industry perspective. I've been joined by FICCI President, Ms. Nainal Kidwai. Ms. Kidwai, as an industry body, what is your first take on the budget?
Yeah. I think overall, it's a balanced budget. It's a budget which I think is important because it recognizes that growth is central to the country. And within that, that industry and manufacturing are critical within that growth equation. And it sets out that without growth, we cannot have equity and indeed inclusion at every level. And I think the fact that it sees all of that as one package is important. It isn't about growth at the cost of something else. It is growth for everybody and good for everybody. The budget itself had many features in it. There, for industry, what of course has been welcomed is the investment allowance, because we do want to have investment come back. But then on the other hand, there's a corporate tax surcharge. So it's a bit of giving with one hand and taking out with the other.
He said that the foreign capital will play a very important role in this thing. So do you think that simplifying procedures by SEBI, will it help or encourage foreign investors?
Most certainly. I think the measures that are coming through for the FII at the behest of FII requests, and it's good they're happening. Clarity on KYC, ease of new FIIs coming through, clarity on how FII and FDI at the 10% level is what will determine that, are very important and will help in themselves. But ultimately, the FII is going to look at the health of the economy. You can have the cleanest tax structure, but have no growth locally, and FIIs won't come in. So for the FII, what is much more important is this a growth budget? Is it going to ensure that industry is competitive, is strong, is good? And are those investment opportunities, therefore, intact?
As an industry body, how do you see the proposals announced for the SME sector, like easy listing on the stock exchanges? How do you see them?
You know, in itself, it's okay. The fact that they can list and get money from qualified institutional investors or investors of a certain order it's a positive. But again, the health of the SME sector is not going to be dependent on just this, easier credit or easier listing.
As an industry body, if you were to rate this budget on a scale of 10, how would you rate this budget?
I'm not falling into that trap. We decided we would not be giving ratings. Yeah.
Nainal Kidwai there says it's a balanced budget. Now, we also have a new guest joining us right now, Mr. Lalit S. Kanoria. He is the chairman of Datmatix Global Solutions Limited, has joined us from Mumbai right now. So, very interesting debate happening here. I don't know, you've just joined a little late, but I will go to a question for you straight away on the securities transaction tax, or STT, has been cut, and in a move that could please proponents of the equity market, a commodities transaction tax, or CTT, has been imposed on non-agricultural commodities. There is a school of thought which said that imposing a CTT would bring back some of the speculative volumes back into equities. Others say this is a negative move. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm not an expert on that subject, but I think it was overdue, and I think what he has done, in my opinion, is correct. The commodities market needed attention, and the taxation, I think, is very valid in my opinion.
Right. So, very quick supplementary.
I can talk about the IT industry.
I want to get a brief overview from you of what kind of a budget do you think really this is, and the kind of sense in the markets and industry in Bombay that you're getting post the budget speech. Very briefly, sir.
I think this is the budget that we should have heard next year, 2014. I think this was the opportunity for the finance minister in this year to take some harder decisions, which he has avoided. He has talked of many problems in his introductory speech, which are very commendable. For instance, he talked about the current account deficit, which is a very, very serious problem. He's highlighted that and he said there's going to be a $75 billion deficit on the current account this year, but he's not talked about how he's going to bridge that deficit, for example. And there could have been a lot of measures that could have been taken to bridge the deficit.
Right, right.
In fact, on the merchandise current account deficit, we are running at about $20 billion every month, which is a staggering kind of a figure.
Right.
And there are many solutions to that problem which we can talk about.
Right. So that point keeps coming up and up. I want to go to the two politicians on the panel. Mr. Nilotpal Basu first, then Mr. Javadekar. Bharat Bhushan raised a very interesting point earlier. He says if people are not really happy with the budget, given the situation Mr. Chidambaram and this government was in, what else could have really he done? If you were in the same spot, can you give us an alternative way or alternative ways of actually cutting the deficit and doing your bit to actually get us out of that CAD and fisc the problem that we are in right now? What would you have done differently? First Mr. Basu, then Mr. Javadekar.
First of all, I will not be in this position because this situation is a self-inflicted goal that he has committed. Because for last 3 years, if you see, I mean, he was giving shops which was not necessary, and he has continued on the same vein now. If you look at the figures of taxes foregone, it is 40,000 crores more. It is now 5,73,000 crores. And you are saying that no relief has been given, no further shops have been given. I mean, that's a damn lie. And this growth obsession, you're saying for inclusion, growth is needed. Now, what is the result? Last year, there was a slowdown. But in the last quarter of the last year, we saw 50 top corporates having a profit growth of 12.5%. So, I think the most major disappointment that will affect the people who don't have a voice like your industry captains and all that is the complete ignorance and the complete overlooking of the inflationary situation that we are in, because 94% of the people today work in the unorganized sector, 40% in contractualized employment in the organized sector, and they do not have any dearness allowance. So, there will be a cut in the real income, and you see the social sector spending, as I have been insisting, that either it is stagnant or there are deep cuts, and subsidy 40,000 crores. The government is saying about international crude oil prices, but why don't they reduce the taxes on oil? Because there is a cascading effect, and which are having an inflationary impact.
Right.
You look at fertilizer, you look at all other items which will also now be moved in railway freight, and which has been linked to the market.
Let's get
a
view of your parliamentary colleague as well, sir.
You are going to deliver all these subsidies through market mechanisms, direct cash transfer, and there will be services withdrawn. I mean, it's horrible.
Right, sir. Let's get a view of your parliamentary colleagues as well. Mr. Javadekar, same question to you. If you and your party were in the same position, would you have alternative solutions?
Okay, thank you. I am leaving. Huh?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Basu, for joining us. Mr. Javadekar, I'm going to ask you the same question. If you were in this position, what would you do?
See, three things very basic. First, in our first avatar of NDA, we were able to manage prices. And the taming of inflation is the real challenge, because it affects adversely common man the most. And that is why, with supply side issues addressed, you can very well do that job. Not only the way UPA did for 13 times, raising the interest rates and squeezing the money supply only. That is not the way to, and we have to need stock of 30 million, and they have stocked nearly 70 million tons. This is absolutely unacceptable bad food stock management. So with those improvements, you can tackle inflation. More important is public investment in irrigation and infrastructure create job opportunities, and thereby promotes agriculture all the way. Irrigation creates more jobs, and irrigation also gives them more revenue. then MSP is not being given as per the rise what is taking place in the cost of production. So agriculturists are not happy, jobs are not created, inflation is killing common people, there is no word of labor, there contract labor exploitation. Everywhere you can see they are not paid the regular employees' wages, their social security issues, all those are not talked about.
Right.
And the food security, the flagship program, that is not provided for. From where he will bring 70,000, 80,000 crore rupees during the year. So, as far as people are concerned, you can take action by really giving more velocity of money created out of infrastructure development and creating jobs, and then, yeah.
Right, sir. We'll get the government perspective as well. Mr. Bhakta Charan Das, who's been patiently waiting. Sir, let me get an answer from you this time around. Mr. Javadekar has the same concerns as does Biraj Patnaik, that even though food security bill has been accounted for in this budget, it's not really an increase. Where is all that money going to come from?
See, right now the minister has placed 10,000 crore rupees for this, and he has assured the House that whatever money would be required, that would be placed, that would be arranged. The question is that the area should not be neglected, that one agriculture area, when we are getting good result from the field of agriculture, the minister for last 3 years consecutively, the UPA government, from 4,75,000 availability of loan for the small and marginal farmer of the country, which comprise the vast population of the country. Last year it was 5,75,000 crore, and for next year he has made the provision of 7 lakh crores. So you see what thrust has been given for the growth of the vast sector, that is agriculture sector, and that to the small and marginal farmers of our country, the poor farmers of the country. And emphasis have been sufficiently given for the storage facilities, godown facilities to preserve the food products of the country.
Right, sir.
So anybody saying that opposition would, no doubt they would try to find out criticism against the government. But government does not want to create a big gap between the poor and rich, between the have and have-nots. We want to make a balance and provide the best to the have-nots. So, and we have done so in the budget. At the same time, the government's compulsion is to keep up the growth of the country intact.
Right. We take your point, sir.
World scenario. That's what the government has done it.
We take your point, sir. Biraj, you have a point. Very quickly.
Very quickly, two things. One is that, let's look at agriculture. Now, it's one thing to say that we've increased credit to 7 lakh crores. But who is getting this credit? 50% of all agriculture credit in Maharashtra is going to Mumbai city. So what kind of agriculture credit are we talking about for small and marginal
farmers? So there is no inclusiveness here?
Absolutely no inclusiveness. What kind of farming happens in Mumbai? I mean, you and I know where that credit is going to. So on one hand, you whittle down the credit norms in order to facilitate corporations taking more and more credit, and then you increase the credit. So it's actually it's insult added to injury added to insult. Now, if you look at food security, I agree. I think Mr. Bhakta Charan Das is right. I'll concede his point that, well, Mr. Chidambaram said this is what we are budgeting now, and if need be, we'll increase it. But what happens to the programs in the food security bill that are already there? For instance, the midday meal program. Now, midday meal program, the ministry had asked for close to 19,000 crores. They had a RE of 11,500 crores. And the reason why that happened is because they were forced to cut their expenditure. So first, from close to 12,000 crores that they had, which was the B, it was cut down to 11.5 in the RE. Otherwise, normally, if you look year on year, midday meal is a scheme where the RE is traditionally been higher than the B.
Right.
Now, they wanted 8,500 crores because, after all, it's a feeding program. Prime Minister himself said that we are, inflation is a worry. We are having the highest inflation in food items in the last 35 years.
And he said so in the speech.
Absolutely. But what did he do to this program? He just increased, he just gave a token increase of 1,100 crores for the midday meals, which is not only covering it, not even covering for inflation. On top of that, the department has been burdened with finding resources to extend the program to private schools in SC, ST and minority dominated areas, to expand the program wherever there are ICDS centers in primary school, and to extend this program for private schools where for the economically weaker section, which is 25%.
Right.
So effectively, the midday meal program as it is, it's a cut of more than 20%, and it's very much a part of the food security bill. So I don't understand where the logic of we'll find the money when we need to, when you needed to most to bolster this program, it's one of the programs that's running reasonably well.
Right.
You refuse to do it. So I don't get the logic.
Bharat Bhushan, he said the first line of the budget speech was that focus has to be on revival of growth, re-acceleration of growth, but we will do it with financial inclusiveness as a starting point. Biraj says there is no inclusiveness in it.
Well, he said that we'll create opportunities, we'll create skills, we will invest in education, and we'll invest in jobs. Now, I think he has attempted to do it. You may not be happy with the way he has done it, but a lot of criticism is unfair to say that he's not bothered about inflation. He said inflation has to be fought on all fronts, and he said food inflation is the biggest problem. To say that he's not protecting poor households or middle class households from inflation is also wrong. In fact, he started index link saving scheme to protect people from this thing. Those who to protect themselves from inflation who are investing in gold. He has given two new schemes. One is the Rajiv Gandhi Equity Saving Scheme has been liberalized, and second is that first-time house buyers will get certain tax concessions, etc. So to sort of read something completely different into the finance minister's speech suggests to me that either Mr. Javadekar was listening to a different speech than me, or his political compulsions force him to
say what he's saying. Right. I want to come to Mr. Soumyakanti Ghosh, but sir, before I come to you, I'll go to Ashwani Kumar first. I want to ask him one very interesting point that the FM made. The finance minister said, sir, Mr. Kumar, that 47% of investment that is going to come in from the private sector. Now, do you really think that's going to happen? Do you really think the private sector is going to respond?
I think what the finance minister was saying is that in an ideal mix, that should be the private sector involvement. That is certainly our hope and our target. But even if we are able to reach somewhere near 47% and inspire the private sector investments into infrastructure, that would be a great national achievement. He has set a target. Let's all try and work together to ensure that that happens. That is an overarching national interest, because $1 trillion or 55 lakh crore rupees, which are envisaged to be spent on the infrastructure sector development in the 12th five-year plan, cannot be financed from public borrowings. So it has to be done through a mix of public and private sector funding, and that is why he has pegged his hope that we would be able to achieve 47% of the investments from the private sector.
Right. Dr. Ghosh, you heard what he said. In an ideal scenario, even if we get around 47%, that would be a great national achievement. Do you think the private sector is up to it?
I really doubt it, because given the infrastructural investments which is talking about 1 trillion in the next 5 years, and given the current climate, I think that he has tried to give incentives, because for example, manufacturing sector, he has given some incentives, but on the other hand, he has also taxed them. So I think there is still a lot of thing between a cup and the lip, and I believe that private sector and the PPP mode, which we have been talking about, the economic survey yesterday also talked about, I think there has a lot of thing has to be done to get into the PPP mode, for which the private investment should have to be given a priority.
Infrastructure got a major thrust. So staying with you, sir, infrastructure got a major thrust in budget 2013-14, with Finance Minister announcing a slew of measures to boost sector's growth, like raising 50,000 crore worth through tax-free bonds, setting up major ports and a road regulator as well. Inflation indexed bonds is something that caught my eye, a very long-standing demand. Talk to us about how you feel about these inflation index bonds.
Yeah, I think if you look at the inflation index bonds, you have to look at it in totality, because the finance minister in the beginning of the speech has expressed concern about the deterioration in the current account deficit. So one way he is looking at the deterioration is a significant increase in the gold imports, and he has also talked about inflation. So what he has done is that he has taken a slew of measures, one of which is the inflation index bonds, so that people actually are hedged against inflation. The other thing which he has done in conjunction with these inflation index bonds is that he has also talked about alternative financial schemes, so that could be an alternative to the gold investment. And at the same time, he has been also very cautious of allowing duty-free imports, increasing the limit on duty-free imports for women to around 1 lakh. So he is fully aware that if he is actually trying to curtail the gold imports, there is always the possibility of increasing to the Hawala route. So that's why he is trying to give an incentive to increase duty-free imports to a limit of around 1 lakh.
Right.
So I think these are sensible steps, but how much is going to contain the current account deficit is a matter of concern, because this year the incline in the current account deficit is more because of the decline in exports and not that of oil and gold imports.
This is a very quick question for Mr. Ashwani Kumar. that if the government, we have a problem with black marketing in the real estate sector. Why don't we increase circle rates when we know that the price that is paid by somebody purchasing a house in large part of the country is very different from the market rate, because the circle rates are kept low, and people buy property or sell property in black. Why don't we increase circle rates to mop up revenue if you're serious about it?
If we have time, we'll go to Ashwani Kumar. Yes, you have a point.
No, I want to add to that question. This 1% tax deducted at source for every property transaction of more than 50 lakhs, it's actually going to increase black money, because people will now undervalue properties because they, whatever the circle rate, they wouldn't want to pay this tax. So in fact, what you're going to do is increase the black market part of property transactions. So I'm one with Biraj when he says that increase the circle rates so that you increase the white component and reduce the black component. Actually, what you're doing through this scheme is increasing the black component.
I have a question for you, Bharat. This is a view that I got throughout the day. Assumptions. Now, the budget assumes a GDP growth of 13.4%, which is almost the same as 2012-13, where the government really didn't do much as well. It came a cropper. The economic survey pushed the GDP figures. Yesterday, the economic survey came out 6.1 to 6.7%. Now, if we assume that average inflation of 6% in 2013-14, we will end up with a GDP growth projection in the range of 12.5% or thereabouts. Thus, 13.4% is a bit of a stretch, even if the higher outlays for planned expenditure next year. Is the Honorable FM putting too much faith in his assumptions in this budget?
No, but you have to, because after all, these are only estimates, and they will be revised, and that's why you get revised estimates at the end of the budget. So a budget is a statement of intent that this is how we want to move, and these are the results we expect.
Biraj, I have 30 seconds on the show. Last word to you. This budget not decisive in any direction. Do you share that view? 30 seconds.
Look, I can only speak for the social sectors. I'd like to repeat what I said right at the beginning. High on intent, low on content.
Right. On that note, we must end the show. I must thank all my guests who joined us, those who were with us and left, and those who are here. Dr. Soumyakanti Ghosh, many thanks for joining us. Bharat Bhushan, as well as Biraj Patnaik. No key takeaways today, of course. We'll let people decide what they really think of this budget. That's all the time we have left. Thank you, good night, and thank you for watching.